There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over an economy when nothing appears to be wrong. The markets are steady. The headlines are ordinary. People go to work, pay their bills, check their accounts, and feel a low, comfortable hum of normalcy. Nothing is on fire. And that, more than anything, is what makes this moment worth paying attention to. Because the most dangerous periods in economic history rarely announce themselves. They didn't arrive with sirens. They arrive wearing the face of calm. We tend to believe that danger looks like danger. We expect a crisis to feel like a crisis from the beginning. A visible crack, a sudden shock, a moment where everyone realizes at once that something has changed. But that is almost never how it actually happens. The most consequential shifts tend to build slowly, silently, underneath the surface that looks perfectly fine. And by the time the surface finally moves, the real change has already happened somewhere you weren't looking. So the question worth sitting with is not whether the economy looks stable. It does. The question is what that stability is actually made of, because stability is not one thing. There is a kind of stability that comes from strength, from a system that is genuinely balanced, resilient, able to absorb shocks. And there's another kind that looks identical from the outside but is something entirely different underneath. It is the stability of stillness, the stability of a system that hasn't been tested in a long time, where the calm isn't proof of health but simply proof that nothing has forced the weaknesses to reveal themselves yet. From the outside, those two kinds of stability are almost impossible to tell apart, and that is the entire problem. Think for a moment about what calm actually does to people. When conditions stay steady for long enough, something shifts in the way we behave. We stop preparing for storms because there haven't been any. We take on a little more risk because the last risk worked out. We assume tomorrow will resemble today because it has for a while now. This isn't foolishness. It's human. It's the completely rational response to a long stretch of things going fine. But here's where it turns. The longer stability lasts, the more confidence it produces. And the more confidence it produces, the more risk quietly accumulates inside the system, not because anyone is being reckless, but because everyone is behaving reasonably in an environment that rewards taking on just a little more. This is the first layer of the paradox. Calm doesn't just fail to remove risk. Calm actively manufactures it. There's a name for a version of this idea that has circulated among economists for decades. The notion that stability itself can be destabilizing. The basic observation is simple and unsettling. When times are good and steady for a long period, people and institutions become more willing to borrow, to lend, to stretch, to assume that the good conditions will continue. Each individual decision looks sensible, but collectively, they build up a fragility that only becomes visible when the calm finally breaks. The stability doesn't prevent fragility, it breeds it. And this is what makes a stable-looking economy so difficult to read. Because the very signals we use to reassure ourselves, steady markets, low volatility, confident forecasts, can be the same signals that are quietly building the next problem. But that is only the surface of it. To really understand why calm can be dangerous, you have to look at what happens to memory, not individual memory, collective memory, the shared sense a society has of what can go wrong. Every serious economic shock leaves behind a generation that remembers it in their bones. People who live through a crash tend to carry a permanent caution. They keep more in reserve. They distrust easy money. They remember viscerally what it felt like when the floor gave way. That caution acts like a kind of immune system. It makes the whole society more careful for years, sometimes decades. But memory fades. The people who remember grow older. A new generation comes up that never experienced the shock directly, that has only known the long stretch of calm that followed, and to them the caution of their elders can look like paranoia. Why hold back? Why keep so much in reserve? Nothing bad has happened. The world has been stable for as long as they can remember. And so, slowly, the immune system weakens, not through any single bad decision, but through the simple passage of time. The lessons that were bought at enormous cost get quietly forgotten, precisely because the calm they produced worked so well. This is the deeper layer. The danger of a stable economy is not just economic, it's psychological, it's generational. Stability erodes the very memory that made stability possible. And here is where the story becomes harder to ignore. Because if the danger lives partly in memory, then the more successfully a system avoids crisis, the more vulnerable it eventually becomes to one. Success breeds forgetting. Forgetting breeds risk. Risk left unremembered breeds the conditions for the next shock. It's a cycle that doesn't depend on villains or mistakes. It depends only on time and on human nature. Now, none of this means a crisis is imminent. That's an important distinction, and it's one the loudest voices in this space tend to skip past. Understanding that calm can conceal fragility is not the same as predicting when or whether that fragility will break. Systems can stay stable-looking for a very long time. Fragility can build for years without cracking. Anyone who tells you they know the date is selling certainty they don't have. But that uncertainty is not comforting. It's the opposite, because it means the real danger isn't a scheduled event you can brace for. It's a present condition you're already living inside. A slow accumulation happening underneath a surface that gives you no reason to look. So let's look. Consider what stability does to the price of risk. In a calm environment, risk becomes cheap. Lending feels safe, so credit expands. Borrowing feels safe, so debt grows. Assets rise steadily, so people are willing to pay more for them, and to borrow more to buy them. Each step is a reasonable response to a stable world, but each step also stretches the system a little tighter, like slowly adding weight to a structure that has never been stress-tested at that load. And because it happens gradually, no single moment feels dangerous. There's no day where anyone rings a bell and says, "We have now taken on too much." The weight just accumulates quietly, under the reassuring hum of everything being fine. This is the mechanism that so much surface-level analysis misses. People look for the spark, the trigger, the event, the bad headline that will start the fire. But the trigger is almost never the real story. The real story is how much dry wood was allowed to pile up during the long, calm season when no one felt any reason to clear it away. A spark that lands on wet ground does nothing. The same spark landing on years of accumulated tinder becomes something else entirely. So when people ask what will cause the next downturn, they're often asking the wrong question. The cause is rarely the interesting part. The interesting part is the fragility that determines whether a small shock stays small or turns into something much larger. And fragility, unlike a trigger, builds precisely during the good times. There's something almost cruel about this structure when you sit with it. It means that the periods we most enjoy, the stretches of prosperity and calm we work so hard to achieve, are also the periods when we are quietly least prepared for the reversal. Not because we're doing anything wrong, because we're doing exactly what a stable environment teaches us to do. But the truth is more complicated than a simple warning, and it's worth being honest about that complexity, because honesty is where the real insight lives. Not every calm period ends in crisis. Sometimes stability is genuinely earned. Sometimes systems really are more resilient than they look, and the calm reflects actual strength rather than hidden strain. The problem is that from the inside, in the moment, you often cannot tell which kind of stability you're living in. The strong system and the fragile one wear the same calm face. They produce the same reassuring signals. They generate the same confidence. That's the part that should give you pause. It's not that stability is always a lie. It's that stability is unreadable. It refuses to tell you which version of itself it is. And a society that cannot tell the difference between resilient calm and fragile calm will tend to treat all calm the same way, as safety, which means it will let its guard down in exactly the moments when its guard mattered most. This is where the story stops being about economics and becomes about something more human, because underneath all of this is a very old feature of how we think. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and one of the strongest patterns we recognize is continuity. When something has been true for a long time, our minds quietly reclassify it from so far so good to this is how things are. The distinction sounds small, but it changes everything. The first is a statement about the past. The second is a belief about the future, and we slide from one to the other without noticing. A person who has never experienced a serious downturn doesn't just lack information. They lack a feeling. They know intellectually that bad things can happen, but they don't carry the weight of it, and so they discount it in 1,000 small decisions. They're not being naive. They're doing what all of us do, extrapolating from the world we've actually lived in. The trouble is that the world we've lived in is a small and recent sample, and the events that matter most are precisely the ones that fall outside it. This is why the most dangerous sentence in economics might be the quietest one. Not this time is different in the sense of reckless euphoria, but something softer and more insidious. Something closer to things have been fine for a long time, so they'll probably keep being fine. That belief feels like realism. It's usually just recency, wearing realism's clothes. And here is the part that turns the lens back on you. Every reassuring signal you use to feel safe, the steady account balance, the calm news cycle, the confident tone of the experts, is a signal that the calm has been holding. It is not and cannot be a signal about how much strain has quietly built beneath it. Those are two different things, and we constantly confuse them. We read the smoothness of the surface as evidence about the strength of the structure. But the surface only ever tells you about the surface. That confusion is not a personal failing. It's built into how the system communicates with us. The information that's easy to see, prices, headlines, sentiment, is almost always about the present calm. The information that actually matters, how much fragility has accumulated, how many assumptions are quietly stacked on top of each other, how thin the reserves have become, is buried, delayed, or invisible until it isn't. So we end up navigating by the wrong instruments. We watch the calm and feel informed, when the calm is exactly the thing that reveals the least. Let's go one layer deeper, because this is where it becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Stability doesn't just fool individuals. It reshapes institutions. When conditions stay calm for long enough, the incentives across an entire system begin to tilt in one direction. Caution stops being rewarded. The careful institution that holds back, that keeps large reserves, that refuses to stretch, starts to look weak next to competitors who took more risk and were rewarded for it by the calm. Over time, prudence gets punished and boldness gets celebrated, not because anyone decided prudence was wrong, but because the environment kept validating the risk-takers. And so the whole system slowly selects for fragility. The most cautious players lose ground or change their behavior to survive. The ones who stretch the furthest look like the smartest people in the room. The definition of responsible quietly drifts, year by year, until behavior that would have seemed dangerous a generation ago becomes ordinary, expected, even required just to keep up. None of this requires anyone to be greedy or foolish. It only requires a long enough stretch of calm and the ordinary human tendency to reward what works. That's what makes it so hard to stop. You can't point to the villain. There isn't one. There's just an environment, quietly teaching everyone in it to lean further and further out over the edge, while the view stays beautiful and the wind stays still. And that is the shape of the real danger, not a single decision. Not a single actor, a drift, a slow collective adjustment of what feels normal, happening underneath the calm that keeps confirming that the adjustment was fine. But none of this explains the final layer, the one that makes the whole thing so difficult to escape. Even when people understand all of this, even when they know intellectually that calm can be dangerous, they usually can't act on it. And the reason is one of the most human things there is. Warning too early is indistinguishable from being wrong. Imagine someone who sees the fragility building. They notice the accumulating risk, the fading memory, the drift toward complacency. They say so out loud, and then nothing happens. The calm continues. A year passes. 2 years. 5. The system stays stable, and the person who warned looks foolish, alarmist, out of touch. Meanwhile, everyone who ignored the warning and kept taking risks looked brilliant, because the calm rewarded them. In a stable-looking economy, caution has a cost you pay every single day, while its benefit only arrives if it ever does, at a moment no one can predict. That's an almost impossible trade for a human being to hold. We're not built to endure years of looking wrong in exchange for the possibility of being right at some unknowable point in the future. So even the people who see clearly often go quiet, or give up, or start to doubt themselves. The calm doesn't just hide the danger. It punishes the ones who name it. And that's the final turn of the paradox. The longer a system stays stable, the more it silences its own warning system, not by censoring anyone, but by making the warnings look ridiculous for long enough that people stop giving them. By the time the fragility is undeniable, most of the voices that saw it early have already been worn down, discredited, or tuned out. So when the change finally comes, it always seems to arrive from nowhere. Everyone asks how no one saw it, but people did see it. They just saw it too early, in a world that had been trained by calm to treat foresight as noise. Now, step back from all of it. Because the point of understanding this isn't to live in fear, and it certainly isn't to predict a date or a disaster. Anyone who claims to know exactly what happens next and when has misunderstood the very thing we've been talking about. Uncertainty is the whole condition. That's the point. The point is something quieter and, in a way, more useful. It's a change in how you read the world. Once you understand that stability is unreadable, that calm tells you almost nothing about the strain underneath, you stop mistaking the absence of visible trouble for the presence of safety. You start asking a different set of questions. Not, does this look stable? But, what is this stability made of? How long has it been since anything tested it? How much confidence has been built on top of it? How much have we forgotten because it worked? Those questions don't give you certainty. Nothing does. But they change your relationship with the calm. They let you hold it a little more lightly, take it a little less for granted, keep a little more in reserve, not out of fear, but out of a clearer understanding of what calm actually is and what it actually isn't. Because in the end, the danger was never really the crisis. Crises are just the moments when hidden fragility finally becomes visible. The danger was always the long, quiet stretch before, the part that felt safe, the part where nothing seemed wrong. The part where the accumulation happened in silence while everyone reasonably relaxed. That's the thing. The smooth surface can never tell you. It can show you that the water is calm. It can't show you how deep it is, or what's moving underneath, or how long it's been since anyone checked. And so we come back to where we started, but see it differently now. The economy still looks stable. That much is true. But you understand now that looks stable and is safe were never the same statement. That one is about the surface and the other is about the structure, and that the entire art of not being caught off guard lies in refusing to confuse them. The calm is not the reassurance we take it for. At best, it's neutral. At worst, it's the sound a system makes while it quietly forgets everything it once learned the hard way. The real question was never whether things look fine. Things almost always look fine, right up until they don't. The real question is the one the calm keeps talking us out of asking. And now that you've heard it, you'll find it difficult to unhear. What is this stability actually made of? And how much of our confidence is just the memory of how long it's been since we last had a reason to be afraid?